Writer Christopher Buckley is here. Tom Wolfe has called him one of the three funniest writers in the English language. Christopher Hitchens has described him as the novelist of Washington life. His previous books have taken a satirical look at everything from tobacco lobbyist to the modern-day book tour. His most recent effort is called Little Green Men. It tells a story of John O'Banion, a conservative Washington pundit who is abducted by aliens. I am pleased to have Christopher Buckley here, who is writing a novel about UFOs and a George Will-like character who thinks he may have been abducted, and this is what we call the novelist of Washington life.
Thank you, Charlie, and good to be here. I'm glad we got through that.
Yes, I am too. So my question, Mr. Buckley, is how did we come to this notion that there is a satirical novel in the plight of a conservative columnist who hosts a Sunday talk show called Sunday, and he therefore has his own little thing with UFOs?
Well, I became enamored of two concepts. Right. One was that the government was behind UFOs as a means of promoting interest in military and space budgets. I don't believe that, but it's not such a far-fetched
But it's a nice topic to write about.
A lovely little idea. And secondly, we all, I think, know people who would admit after a couple of martinis a belief in flying saucers. You might, being from your part of the world...
Former president here, former president there.
Well, as a matter of fact, you might know someone who knows someone who knows someone who professes a belief in alien abductions. According to the polls, something like 30% of the American people believe that aliens are regularly abducting Americans. Anyway, but these are not... the people who believe in these things call them, workaday Americans. They're not, you don't meet them at big Washington dinner parties or New York dinner parties. Kay Graham does not announce a belief in these things. To my knowledge, Charlie Rose does not announce that he believes.
No.
But what if one did? So I brought these two concepts together, and so there's this stuffy sort of George Will-like character who's a real Bigfoot in Washington. He rules the airwaves. He is sort of George Will plus John McLaughlin plus all of them rolled together. He's a powerhouse, and everyone wants to be on his show. And what if someone like that suddenly, in the midst, with someone with his own TV show, his own column, a guy who moderates presidential debates, suddenly professed not only the sure belief that aliens are abducting humans, starting with him, but that this must become the urgent national priority of the United States government. So in the book, this shadowy government agency that has been, U.S. government agency that's been set up during the Cold War, not so far-fetched, by the way, to promote this belief, but mostly to deceive the Soviet. It was a disinformation program to convince Stalin and the Soviet Union that these things existed and that we had their technology. Well, the Cold War is over, but as you know, a lot of government programs don't end. They just go on. And so this thing has been reduced to a dingy little office in the basement of the Social Security Administration with a guy, with a disgruntled guy. You know, we have disgruntled postal workers. The guy in charge of deciding whom to abduct has worse potential for being disgruntled. And one day his transfer application is denied, so he gets drunk, and he looks up on a screen on Sunday morning and sees this John O'Banion character interviewing the president, and he orders his abduction. Yeah. And it's how these two guys come together. You'll note, but being a sophisticated literary personage such as myself, you'll note the initials, the significance of the initials of the main character, J-O-B.
Yeah, Job.
Job, yeah.
Job, yeah.
The righteous man who loses everything. And
now, here's my point.
Enough about my book.
No,
what do you think about my book?
No, this question. Who is the object of the satire here? Those people who believe in UFOs? Or
No, it's not really that. I myself am a UFO.
The pomposity of Washington
I'm a UFO
pundits.
agnostic, and it's a little too easy to make fun of people who believe that aliens are abducting them.
Right.
That's kicking cripples. No, I think the object of the satire here is, if you'll pardon the world of the TV pundit world, the Washington establishment.
The pomposity of it all.
The White House.
Yeah.
The president plays a fairly large role in here.
All right. Now, here is the story that
the military establishment, and also the government's penchant for secrecy.
Yeah, because in fact,
which has helped to promote a culture in which 70% of the people, roughly the same number as believe that President Kennedy was killed in an assassination, believe in UFOs.
The rule of satire is what? That generally, in the past, it was that it has to have enough truth in it so that you can take it to the extreme to make your point.
Yeah, I think it's got to be plausible. Now, this is whether you try to sort of pull up on the stick just short of augering in. My stuff tends to be sort of over the top, but not entirely implausible. Well, you can be the judge of that. But I mean, my stuff is sort of antic and far-fetched. But I think you can read it as a descant, as a take on what goes on. I think there's probably a lot of reductio ad absurdum, to use a word
No
that a
kidding.
certain relative of mine would use. But these books are they're researched.
Yeah.
You
went to the conventions for this.
I went
you
to
did
the
that.
conventions.
You
I
looked at
worked
some of the
at the White
characters. You
House.
got some sense of the language they use and the ideas that they play with.
I read a lot of their literature.
Yeah.
And UFO literature is abundant. I mean, you can go into Barnes & Noble, and there's fiction, nonfiction, fly fishing, gay and lesbian awareness, and UFOs.
I bet it is the internet, they must have more sites than you can shake a stick at, we would say, in North Carolina, when you think about all those people from all over the world.
No,
who want to interact with others
community.
Who care
about. What interested me about the UFO world is that it's an alternate belief system. This is a very new myth. It began on June 25th, 1947, when 9 flying saucers were spotted over Mount Rainier, which may have been some military aircraft that the Air Force didn't want to talk about. So they say nothing. People jump to conclusions. 2 weeks later, there was Roswell. About 10 years later, Jung, the Swiss psychologist, wrote a book on it in which I think the sentence occurs, we are privileged to be present at the birth of a new myth. I wouldn't stretch the following analogy too far because it'd make everyone cross, but as I sat there in that UFO convention, it crossed my mind that being there in the catacombs with the early Christians who were professing belief in something which would have seemed to any proper Roman citizen absolutely mad. Christianity, the whole concept of Christianity. Was that there were certain phenomenological parallels. Right. So that's what interested me.
When you left Bush, as in the former president, as his speechwriter.
I worked for him as vice president.
As vice president,
right,
right. In
83 I left, actually.
Did you set out to write novels and satirical novels? Is that what your golden ambition was?
No. I became, God, this all sounds so pompous, but I ended up writing comic fiction by accident because...
That's pompous to say that I'm in this career that I accidentally fell into?
The way I was originally started out that sense, I became a comic novelist. I stumbled into it. Life is a series of accidents. I don't know if you set out to be sitting in this room, but
no,
if you did, you've succeeded.
I succeeded.
I
set out to find a
to
UFO.
find God. Well, good luck. If you find him, tell him to give me a call.
I want little green men that I can talk to.
I'll give you my cell phone number.
You know him. So let me.
I worked at I went to work at the White House as a low-level speechwriter, and Bush asked me.
And found it to be a low-level life.
No, I found it fascinating. It was.
Come on, I've read a quote of yours in which you said it's extraordinary. You'll stand in a room with two politicians knowing they're lying to each other and with no real sense that, you know, anybody knows otherwise.
But that's not an uninteresting situation.
Place to be.
Believe me. I was, as our Bush's hands and mine were about to shake on coming to work, he said, "Oh, there is one thing." And I said, "Yes." He said, "Would you mind terribly not writing about it after you finish?" Now, a writer's life is his capital, so by agreeing to do this, I was, in effect,
making this a short-term
taking
appointment.
out a very long certificate of deposit. But I became fascinated with the White House memoirs while I worked at the White House, and I had all this material. And anyway, I mean, it wasn't as though I could have written a very interesting memoir. No, to my knowledge, no vice presidential speechwriter has written the Ur memoir.
There's always a first.
Well, there's a first. But so I decided to make fun of the literary form of the White House memoir, and so I wrote, by accident, a comic novel called The White House Mess, which I think you had me on the show.
I did, in fact. Tell me what you think of the president and all that we have been through as a country over the last year.
You know, the last time I was on the show 2 years ago, you asked me a question that struck me as odd, which was, will President Clinton finish out his term? This was pre-Monica and...
Prescient I was.
Ça va sans dire. Well, I think he's put the country through hell, quite literally. It's not a year I think any of us would care to relive. And now I suppose I don't know what goes on in his soul. My meeting with him was very brief. He occupies he has the second epigraph.
Right.
Should I tell that story?
No, yes, please.
I met him at a book party, and our hands shook, and he said, "Did you write that book about the White House, about the tobacco lobbyist?" I said, "Yes, sir." The presence of president is always, there's something of magnetism, and he is a magnetic guy. There's a tractor beam. He is really quite extraordinary. You see why Maureen Dowd suggested in her column that he might be the devil. But I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "That was the funniest goddamn book I've ever read," which made me immediately want to run out and register for Democrat. Obviously, it was a practiced line. Someone had whispered in his ear, you know, he writes books. But then he said...
See, I wish you hadn't said that. I am so gullible. I was going to say, how smart is this president? He knew the book, he knew what it was about, and he didn't obviously know you were going to be there.
No, but
gullible
Sidney Blumenthal was there to whisper in his ear.
I see.
Wrote a book about a tobacco novelist comic.
Yeah.
So, you know, but at the time, believe me, I was a believer. I believe. You know?
Everything they've said about you.
So he said, "That was the funniest goddamn book I've ever read." And I said, "Well, Mr. President, I may have to use that as a blurb." And he laughed, and he said, "Well, better leave out the swear word or you'll get me in trouble." How innocent this seems. This was 1 month before the Monica story broke. So he said, "What are you working on now?" I thought, oh my God, Buckley, President of the United States has just asked you for a plot summary of your novel, which is something I don't even inflict on my good friends. So I said, "Well, you know, boil this down to 10 words." So I boiled it down to U.S. government is behind UFOs. And he laughed in a way that struck me as, at the time, just the practiced reflex of a politician. Well, 2 weeks later, I'm reading USA Today, my favorite newspaper, and there is this from it was an interview with Webster Hubbell, who was, I think, doing between jail stints and promoting a book. Yeah. And here's the quote.
Yes.
President Clinton said, quote, "Hub, there are two things I want you to find out for me. One, who killed JFK? And two, are there UFOs?" I thought, what an extraordinary world that the President of the United States has to turn to his Arkansas big-lipped crony.
Deputy Attorney General.
Deputy Attorney General, one of the most powerful guys in the U.S. government, to find out who killed JFK.
What's the connect here?
Are there? Well, the helplessness of the chief executive. Remember when there's a marvelous line by Harry Truman, who was escorting President Eisenhower to his inauguration. And after, just before getting in the car, Truman said to one of his aides, he said, poor Ike, he's used to being a general. He'll sit there now and say, do this, and nothing will happen.
Eisenhower had a valet who would bring his trousers and hold them while he stepped one foot after the
Couldn't
other
you use
into
one of those
his trousers.
on a Monday morning? I'm ready now.
Ready to bring my trousers.
Bring
James.
on the trousers.
James.
Yes, sir.
That's what happened. One last thing. You are a friend of Christopher Hitchens.
I am.
And you're a friend of Sidney Blumenthal, the aforementioned Sidney Blumenthal.
And it's an interesting situation.
Give me your take on that before we leave here.
I think, well, I said at the time, in the heat of it, I likened it to, I called it our generation's Chambers Hiss moment.
Yeah.
A quote that's gone sort of rocketing around. I think Christopher Hitchens is an honorable guy. I think this was an extraordinary thing that hit a lot of people in the face, but the culture of Washington is such that there are certain rules. I think Christopher did what he considered to be the right thing, which is to say he could not permit. Christopher is a rigorously honest guy, and that can cause pain and heartache in a city that is more comfortable with sort of a kind of a workaday mendacity. Remember Michael Kinsley, editor of Slate, and very fine journalist, defined a gaffe in Washington as when someone accidentally speaks the truth. Yes. Now, clearly, telling on someone is a difficult thing. It goes back to the days of our earliest, when we're very young, we're told not to tell. But I think
for those of you who wonder, what in the world are we talking about? Christopher Hitchens, a Washington journalist, Sidney Blumenthal, a former Washington journalist, now works at the White House, a friend of the First Lady and the President, said, I guess, that he did not spread any bad stories out there about Monica Lewinsky during the scandal of the last year. And Christopher Hitchens said, wait, there was a famous lunch with me and my wife in which I was given information that, in a sense, was negative about Monica Lewinsky, and I cannot let the aforementioned comment go by without stepping forward to say, I beg to differ. Do I have it about right?
You have it about right. I would just add this one other detail. A lot of people rushed to denounce Christopher, a lot of Christopher's friends, and get on the record in the Washington Post that they would that Christopher Hitchens would never again darken their doorstep. Well, in a couple of weeks, Christopher Hitchens will be co-host of the Vanity Fair White House Correspondents' Party, which is the party of the year. And I'll be very curious to see how many of those people decide not to darken his doorstep. This will tell us a lot about Washington.
You see, that's satire to me right there. I mean, do you need anything more that you need to know about journalism, about the White House, about Washington, and about the way human nature works? I rest my case.
Nothing more need be said. It would be Balzac could do no better.
Could know no better. All right, this book is a novel. It is called Little Green Men. Christopher Buckley, thank you, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.